All right, so I am Gabriella Taylor, and today I have the beautiful, luminous Jules Shore with me. She is
Hi.
the author of Setting Boundaries That Stick: How Neurobiology Can Help You Rewire Your Brain to Feel Safe, Connected, and Empowered. And Jules has been a newer teacher of mine. I think 2 years ago was when
Hmm.
our paths crossed, and I've done some courses with you that have just been
Yeah.
very, very um, beyond insightful, but deeply transformative. So I'm so grateful for this
Oh,
here.
oh, that's so wonderful. I'm thrilled that that landed. That's always my hope. But it's lovely to hear it landed in that way.
And we'll dive into why, so
Hmm.
anyone that's listening to this can get a sense to see, because
Yeah, yeah.
the lens that I look through is the lens of the brain,
Hmm.
body, the nervous
Hmm.
system, how that
Hmm.
informs our psyche, our self-perception, the stories we tell about ourselves, what we can or cannot do, and other, and
Hmm.
all of that operating sort of under the umbrella of us being divine beings,
Yeah.
an experience under the umbrella of soul. So I'm always looking at what's the conversation that's happening within our brain, our psyche, and our soul as it
Mm-hmm.
relates to the raising of the collective consciousness of the feminine on the planet
Hmm.
at this time, because the stakes are high, and
Hmm.
we're also coming out of a thousands of years of a patriarchal culture where really we've been shut off from our humanity, and
Yeah.
systematic erosion of the feminine has
Hmm.
really it lives inside of us today. So why I'm here
Hmm.
and why I'm thrilled to be here with you is that I feel I can feel the zeitgeist in the air. There's a spirit of
Hmm.
change. There's a spirit of the time that is calling the feminine to rise. And the Western feminine psyche is not quite prepared because
Hmm.
we've been living under a veil of being shut down, backed into a corner, acquiescing, fighting
Hmm.
back. And so to me, I'm like, how can
Hmm.
we come together, you and I, you and every woman I connect with, and really
Yeah.
look at the how? How do we grow stronger inside of ourselves in a whole new way? So
Hmm.
thrilled to sort of come and look at, like, literally the neurobiological how as well as
Yeah.
the other hows here today.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm delighted to be a tiny part of your calling, mission, longing. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, in the tiny but mighty parts that we play,
Hmm.
like, so I think about, okay, what are the things that, and I'm sure you've seen this because you're a clinician, you've been in
Hmm.
with people for a long time. I look at that not only have our brains been shaped around systematic trauma for thousands of years.
Sure.
There's the whole relationship with what we're discovering in terms of how our genes are responding to turning
Hmm.
on and off for generations of trauma.
Yeah.
There's the unspoken or untended to trauma that may have happened at home with mom, dad,
Hmm.
and ourself, our siblings,
Hmm.
what happened to
Hmm.
mom when we were in utero. And then
Hmm.
there's our own lived experiences. And
Yeah.
so to me, we're walking around in a culture that is filled with broken hearts and brains that have organized around trauma.
Yeah. That
And
have, can we be really hyper specific around that?
yes,
That have organized around predicting scarcity
mm,
and bad, like
yeah,
hard is coming next. So when we say, oh, we've organized around trauma, what is that? What is it that we're meaning?
mm, yeah,
Because your brain, especially in the lower parts of it, is making predictions all the time without you even being aware of it. You don't need any awareness to do this. And it has to do that because it has to tell your blood where to go next in your body so that 5 seconds from now, when you need it, it's ready.
so let's even break this down, right?
Yeah.
Because women, when they have a hard time speaking up, and did I just cut in? Were you in the middle of
No,
a
no, go for it. I love it. You can jump. I want you to interrupt me all the time because I think there's like, it's the collaborative space where the thoughts are jumping over each other that creates the juice. So
Yes.
please
Okay.
feel free to
So
just keep
with
doing it.
that, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's even break it down more. So
Yeah,
one
yeah,
of the things that women, by and large, that I see really struggle with is speaking up, using
of
their voice
course.
for a really good
Hmm.
reason. So
Hmm.
what is happening in their brain that is they know they have something to say, but they're unable
Hmm.
to say it? What is
Hmm.
happening? And then what can they do to help their brain do the thing
Right,
that they need to do? What are
right,
your,
right.
let's like riff on that for
Ooh, well, I have lots of thoughts on that. Okay, so what is it that's happening? Well, in the lower subconscious parts of your brain that are moving very, very fast, there are emotional knowings, is how I put it. There are these emotional knowings that are learned, usually not even necessarily verbally. It may not even be something you remember. But all these emotional knowings, they hold predictions about how the earth works, about how the world works. And some of them are like, what does my house look like at sunrise? And why do I look out that window as the sun's coming up? Right? I don't even have to remember that it's sunrise. It's like my whole body's called that direction. Well, that's an emotional knowing. Some emotional knowings are amazing. Like when I think about, oh, later I'll greet my 10-year-old sweet daughter and ask her about how school was. And she may or may not answer me because she's 10. So she's starting to go, I don't know, it's fine. Right.
it.
Right. So even as I enter into that, I might have predictions of sweetness and predictions of wonder and predictions of, ooh, will she kind of be a little quieter today? What is that going to feel like for me? All of that lives in me. Those are all emotional knowings, these predictions that we're kind of walking on. Well, we all, let me say this before I even go on. Whatever you know is as unique as a fingerprint or a snowflake to you. So I'm going to talk broadly, but I don't want you to think that the broad stroke is enough. Yours is yours. So I don't know exactly what it is that you learned. Sorry, go ahead. What did you
So
say?
you're saying it's subjective.
It's totally subjective. So there's somehow, when I think about, oh, there are tons and tons of women who know they have something to say and then don't speak, there is some sort of prediction about something scary or bad that happens if you were to speak. And you learned that somewhere. And I don't know what each individual listener learned. Some of us learned it'll be ignored anyway. Some of us learned it'll be punished. Some of us learned it'll be rejected. I'll be thrown out. Myself will be rejected. My soul will be rejected, right? Or that something bad, scary is going to happen to my body. We all have these different experiences. What happens if you use your voice? Will I be humiliated in some way? And I look at some of the research that's been done around boys and girls and cutting off of voices. I do know that if you're a woman who feels like, ooh, yeah, I have something to say, but I don't talk, you're really not alone. Because by around 8 to 9, in a bunch of the research that's out there, girls start saying, I don't know. And they start speaking less and they stop answering questions in class. Well, if it's that systemic, there must be something going on where a lot of us are getting these messages of, no, 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 your voice doesn't belong here in some way. And in order, right, to help the bad thing not happen, whatever it is you learn to predict, oh, the automatic way to protect yourself might be to get a knot in your throat, to have tightness show up in your chest, to hold your breath all of a sudden, to start talking yourself out of, well, maybe my idea doesn't really matter that much. Well, maybe I shouldn't, I'm probably being dumb. I probably shouldn't think about it like that. I'm not sure my voice really matters that much anyway. So maybe yours is a thought cascade or a body clenching or a mind blankness. As soon as you have the idea, it's gone from your head. Your body is doing that because it learned to adapt to the bad thing that kept happening. And it usually is more than once. Oh, isn't that hard?
Mm.
That part makes me upset.
It's like I take that in, and that makes me so upset too, because I think of these precious, I mean, myself at 8 years old,
Mm-hmm.
at 8 years old, hearing your
Mm-hmm.
daughter who's 10, she's already
Mm-hmm.
her own version
Yeah. Her
of
own version of it. Mm-hmm.
that conflict that comes in between
Mm-hmm.
being true to ourselves and then the forces that be telling us stop, and
Yeah.
that emotional knowing, the things
Yeah.
that we're doing.
Yeah.
And so for some people listening, they might be thinking, "Oh, well, nothing really happened to me, but I still feel
Mm-hmm.
those things." To what
Mm-hmm.
why might that be? Is there some
Well, something did happen, I promise, but it may be more subtle than you think.
say
So
more.
it, yeah, it could be one. I just want to honor that we all have different nervous systems, and some of us have more social sensitivity, and some of us have more sensory sensitivity, and some of us have more um, get up and go, like, or go tackle the world energy, and all that's kind of DNA related, and it's just how you're born and it's who you are in this world, and lovely. And for some folks, gosh, a look that goes, hmm, you know, like one of those looks where somebody looked at you like with a little tinge of judgment or a little tinge of warning in a look, and it happened over and over and over again, or a little eye roll, even that can catch some of us like, oh, that's a little bit of a micro drop of humiliation. Oh, there's something wrong with me.
And I
And
love that you're
yeah.
talking about this just because some people, like myself, I have a trauma history.
Mm-hmm.
It's definable, it was predictable, it was
Mm-hmm.
repeatable. But for a lot of women that really
Mm-hmm.
struggle, they're like, "Oh, my family was fine, mom and dad loved me,
Mm-hmm.
nothing bad happened." But what I hear you saying is even the most subtle inflections of
Mm-hmm.
something wrong with you could actually land as a, injury, if you will.
Yes.
And this is
Yes.
so important to honor and recognize.
Totally. And I don't want to be blaming parents here. I want to be talking about this as a larger system.
Yes. Mm,
This is this is generations and centuries of this messaging being passed down.
mm,
Sometimes it's like, oh, kids should be seen and not heard. I'm
mhm,
sure lots of people have heard that phrase before. Wow, what? Where does this come from, this thinking? And so it could be even something bigger than just your parents, like, oh, they gave you a side eye when you said a thing that felt true to you, but so did your teacher.
mm,
And so did your friends as they started getting used to how the system operates.
mhm,
And so did the guy in math class.
mhm.
And you just feel it over and over and over again from all these places. And your body goes, oh, got it. So when I talk, I should expect to be rejected or something bad to happen to me. So I should just talk less and smile more. Sometimes that's part of it too. Mm-hmm. And
Yes.
by the way, I get positive social feedback from that.
Mhm, mhm.
And so now my system's learning, got it. Don't talk, smile,
Yes.
even if
Yes.
it hurts you.
And even making that connection
Mm-hmm.
with particularly our Western culture that is, that revolutionary book that came out, I think in the 80s, The Beauty Myth, but that
Mm-hmm.
really spoke about because, or this is my interpretation, because women were not valued for who they were. We
Mm-hmm.
learned that our power came from our ability to manage other people's perception of us,
Yes.
specifically what we look like, let alone, how we think and, how
Mm-hmm.
helpful we are. But I really appreciate that tender intersection in our developing brain and developing self from, oh, something is telling me to tamp it down.
Mm-hmm.
Culture is telling me that if I can do something to my body or my appearance that will then
Mm-hmm.
garner me social kudos, then that's where I'm going to go. So it makes sense why so many
Yeah,
women are walking around with body image distortions,
of
food
course.
All of these things that we silently shame ourselves for, but
Right.
we were groomed to go there and to hold back our voice over here.
Yeah. And this, our brain is so highly adaptive.
Mm.
It's it's born mushy, is what I tell folks when I'm teaching. Your brain is born mushy, and that's great in many ways because you can adapt. Look at all these environments we live in. We don't live in one environment. The Amazon isn't our only environment. We live in all the environments all over the earth because we're so highly adaptable.
Mm.
And that's great in 1,000 ways. And
Mhm.
it's also a little bit hard because we can adapt too hard pretty easily.
Mhm.
And that's what I think has been happening. Oh, there's nothing wrong with you. I really mean this. There's nothing wrong with you. Your
Mhm.
brain did a normal adaptation so that you could survive as well as is possible and get as many needs met as is possible in the environment in which you were born.
And what you're saying, I believe, is part of the when I look back at even how a lot of personal development work, modern psychology, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
spiritual traditions really
Mm-hmm.
came from men, a masculine,
Mm-hmm.
and I love men. I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
the power differential of where I
Yeah.
see a world where men and women's power voices, are equally valued. However, with
Mm-hmm.
what I hear you saying, it's led us to sort of pathologize ourselves and each other. Like, oh, what's the matter with you? You should know better. And I
Yeah.
see this with women all of the time that are hugely successful, hugely accomplished, very
Mm-hmm.
self-aware. It's like, oh, I know I shouldn't take it personally, but I do. Or I
Yeah.
shouldn't feel bad, but I do. And I love what you're saying because there's a wisdom and an intelligence that's caused us to
Yes.
respond the way we do.
Of
And
course.
we want to bless and welcome the struggles and the challenges as
Mm-hmm.
much as the capacity to heal and grow. And so I just
Yeah.
you speaking of that.
Oh, totally. And I love that you're bringing in welcoming and compassion here, because when it comes to shifting our brains, this gets into a little bit of the how,
Mm, mhm,
right? How does a brain change? Well, it needs activation and regulation at the same time.
mm,
So it needs that prediction to come online. Oh no, if I speak, a scary thing is going to happen, right? If that network's going to shift at all, it actually has to be up and active.
mhm. So let's break that down. So up and active, and this is one of the brilliant things
Hmm.
that we did our memory reconsolidation.
Hmm.
When I did your memory reconsolidation training
We
for
did ours. We were co-creating it, love.
but
Yeah.
it was so, the level of permission that came in, and we actually want to so just for anyone listening, so activation, meaning when we're triggered, that moment
Yeah.
when we want to, like, fight back, or our stomach clenches up, or we wanna throw up, or our throat seizes, or we're,
Hmm.
like, suddenly, shooting poisonous darts at someone, that moment of trigger, we don't want to tamp it down.
Right. I actually don't want to get rid of it.
We
It
don't
won't change. It
right.
will not
It won't
change.
change. So if we continue to try and override it or be
Mhm.
mindful over it, it won't change.
That's
And
right.
this is I really hope everyone who's listening to this hears this.
Yeah.
It won't change if we squash it or tamp the trigger down. However,
Right.
what we want
However, what we want to do is we want to let it be there, and we want to add a little bit of loving kindness towards it,
Mm,
some welcoming towards it. And what's going to happen is that prediction stays active. Oh, electricity is still running through that network in your brain. The trigger is still present. And also, there's a little bowl of receptivity,
mm,
a kindness and a love and a self-compassion that's into, I call it of courseness.
mm,
Oh, sweet one, of course you have that prediction. Of course you learned that. Of course you learned to speak less. Of course you learned your voice didn't matter. That makes sense.
mm,
A little bit of, and ow,
mm.
and
Yeah.
oh, you don't get seen because of it. I'm so sorry. A little bit of ouch awareness. And then, oh, that balance in the brain starts holding our brain in a state that is easier to change, which is why I want to support people in having self-compassion so much. Like, instead of saying, oh, get the trigger away, or I don't want to be triggered anymore, we're going to support our brain change better if we say, of course I'm triggered, and doesn't make me a terrible person. It does mean I'm going through a hard moment, like all these other ladies are going through hard moments, and I'm not alone in it.
And if a woman, how would you get, I'm thinking of a client of mine. I do a lot of work with female leaders and founders
Mm-hmm.
and women that are really on the front line that are creating,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much pushback. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's one thing to like have an idea that you dare to bring alive and
Yeah.
then change. And so I'm thinking of one client here. And so she was in a board meeting. I think it was, 10 white men and
Mm-hmm.
one of the men, she was giving her idea, a very beautiful, powerful idea that was a life affirming idea of something that she wanted, she was proposing and seeking funding on. And one man disliked what she was saying so much that he crossed his arms and turned around in his swivel chair to her
Oh, wow.
during this board meeting. So in this moment, she could feel every ounce of her, that prediction, that predicted
Mm-hmm.
knowing of how her voice, like, did not matter. She had a
Right.
whole history of this with her family being told to
Mm-hmm.
quiet, shut up. So in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, what could she have done if
Mm-hmm.
we were to kind of mock that up, bringing in
Yep.
compassion in real time? What
Yep.
what would that look like in real time?
In real time, I'd want two things, and these are back end skills we would build elsewhere, and then we would be able to have them inside that moment. So, and we can break down exactly what these are, and then we'll go back to that moment and play them out.
Mhm.
So, the two skills are psychological boundary and loving kindness, compassion towards self,
Mhm.
right? So, what we're going to do is we're going to, on the back end, build a psychological boundary image. And I'll tell you why we get to an image in just a second, but let me first say a little bit about what is a psychological boundary. Jules, what do you mean? I talk about boundaries a lot. I don't think about boundaries like a lot of people think about boundaries, or maybe I have some tweaks and ideas about how to think about boundaries. I don't think when I use that word, I don't mean one thing. I have 4 different kinds of boundaries.
Mhm.
And right now I'm only talking about one of them. And it's one of the ones I define as an internal boundary. And what is a psychological boundary? A psychological boundary is moving into deep acceptance that minds are different than each other, because we have DNA differences and different lived experiences. And inside of that deep acceptance, I'm going to create protection for myself so that my mind is protected from your mind,
Mm.
and so that your mind is protected from mine.
Mm.
And the psychological boundary holds both these concepts. So let's take this moment, for example. If I had a psychological boundary, I could do instant, right? Because I'm going to embed it later on in the lower brain. I'm going to do instant discernment, is what I call it.
Mm.
Is this about me? Is this true? So here's this guy. He's turning around, he's got his back to you, and we can guess what he might be thinking. Your idea is dumb, or you have no right to be here, or I'm going to put all that over there in him. And I'm going to ask myself, is that true? Is that about me? And if the answer to either of those is no, then I don't let it in. I keep that over there. Right? So that's the first part, is wait a second. Even when people are using the language you in the sentence, it does not mean it's actually about you. It may actually be entirely what's going on in that person. And I don't know what that is. So that's the first thing is,
And before you go
yeah.
to the second thing, I
Mm-hmm.
just want to underline that because this is why, I mean, my God, I can't remember when I've ever not had like 2 therapists and a coach, or a therapist and 2 coaches or something, because
Yeah.
this is where we need support. And so just,
Yeah.
of course, like what you were saying, just to underline that, this is the work that's done behind the scenes.
That's right.
We can build up that treasure trove of an internal
Mhm,
resource, so that way
mhm,
we're trained. It's sort of like, I think of it as like there's weak muscles that have been
mhm,
underdeveloped,
mhm.
psychological muscles of the psychological boundary, like you're beautifully,
Right.
and so we wanna do the training behind the scenes, which is
Behind the scenes.
do this the deeper, work, the healing work, the integration work, the
Mhm.
so that in that moment,
Oh,
discernment,
it's there.
he's
It's
like,
there.
it comes online, it
It
fires.
comes online like that.
Love it.
Exactly. So we're doing this behind the scenes and we've already practiced our discernment so that it's more available to me in a moment like that.
Yeah, love it. Great.
Yeah. So we could guess all these things. Your idea is bad. Wait a second, is that true? No. If he thinks the idea is bad, is that about me? No, that's about him. Okay, all that's going to stay over there.
Mhm.
So all that body turn and whatever's going on in his brain, meh, is probably not mine. So we're going to keep it on the outside of our boundary. The other thing the psychological boundary does, I call it listening with acceptance.
Mm.
Oh, this one is tough for folks. I want to prep us now. We can all breathe for a second, feel ourselves and where we are in space
Mhm.
according to your body. Like, think about where you are right now and where the sun rose this morning. You're okay. You're right here, because I'm about to say something that wigs people out a little bit. What if all the feelings and thoughts, not all the behaviors, I'm separating out behaviors, but what if all the feelings and thoughts that are happening in another person are just them becoming themselves through time?
Mm. Mm.
And so I don't really need to mess with any of them for me to be okay. They can actually think and feel absolutely whatever it is they're thinking and feeling.
Mhm.
And it's not dangerous to me in any way.
Mm.
And when I think about it like that, if I can let that really live in me, what I end up doing is being less psychologically invasive to other people. It's
Mhm.
more respectful.
Mhm.
So let's say I'm married to a guy named Adam. Let's say Adam and I are having a difference of opinion about something to do with our kid, right? And he thinks we should do X, Y, and Z um, with something around, I don't know, a boundary around an iPad or something. And he's feeling really stressed in that moment. If I try to get him to stop being stressed, he's going to feel invalidated and abandoned by me and not heard. And we end up in a tussle. Guess what? Same is true the other way. What if I'm really frustrated in a moment? And then he says, "Stop making such a big deal about this. I think you're just thinking about this all wrong." Oh, right? I don't want him to do that to me. I don't want him to change how I'm thinking and feeling. I just want to be me as I move through time and space. So
Mm.
this move is deeply respectful of other people. Yes, even when they do something like this gentleman in the boardroom. So I'm trying to live into my own. This is my journey around how do I really live into loving kindness towards others? As I say, okay, well, no matter what that guy is thinking or feeling, frustration with me or whatever else in the moment, that's actually not my journey. That's his journey. I don't need to change it for me to be all
And
right.
so what I hear you saying, which this is what I really love about this, is that
Mm-hmm,
we actually want to tend to that which is stored within the
mm-hmm.
downstairs brain,
Yep.
holds that emotional knowing and prediction that
Mm-hmm,
gets triggered in us, that got
mm-hmm,
triggered my client that day. Her whole history
mm-hmm.
got triggered the day that he turned around.
Of course.
And through the process of whether it's working with another safe other that can help us
Mm-hmm,
develop some
mm-hmm,
internal resource, some internal support through the witnessing, through the compassion, it
Mhm.
actually gives us access to a little bit more of that discernment and objectivity by bringing online our upstairs brain.
That's exactly right.
Because I can imagine some people are like, yeah, I know I should,
Right,
again,
right, right.
or I know I should, not take Adam personally, but we want to honor that that's a process of getting there. And I know you're,
That's right.
yeah.
This is exactly right. And in order to have our upstairs brain be more present with us, what we need to do is increase safety.
Ooh, so this, yes,
That's why I want you to have a psychological boundary.
yes,
I
yes.
want you to add psychological protection for yourself. So you are in charge of increasing your safety, not whether that guy turns around or not. That is not how you increase your safety. He can turn around or not turn around, but I am in charge of increasing my safety in this moment. That I have more empowerment to do that. And again, on the back end, we've held these ideas of listening with acceptance and discernment. And we're going to tap into something called the mentalization neural network. That's a fancy word for a vast system in your brain. Its hub is in the lower part, but some of its tendrils reach into the upper part of your brain. And that part guesses about what's going on in other people's minds. And it does it so fast, an eighth to a twelfth of a second.
Ooh, what is it again?
An eighth to a twelfth of a
Oh,
second.
wow.
It's
So
guessing already what's going on in the other person's brain. Boom, boom, boom. And figuring out, oh, their mind is not my mind, and all of that lives in there. Now, when I was looking at the mentalization neural network, I was looking at anatomy and where are the neurons pointed. And I realized that the mentalization neural network hub in the lower brain listens to your belly and your heart. So it's getting its feed from the sensations that are going on in your viscera, in your heart and diaphragm and belly brains. And
mentalization network that is projecting ahead what's going to come is
guessing what's happening in the other
input.
person.
It's taking input not from objective assessment, but it's
That's
taking
right.
input from this stream that's coming up from our viscera, from our
Yes.
belly. Phenomenal.
Yes, that is correct. And
Mhm.
it happens to live in a part of your brain that speaks image,
Mm, mm,
gesture, um, the sense of a thing. It speaks image world. And
mm,
so I developed a practice that people can do where they let their heart and belly hold these concepts of discernment and listening with acceptance. And then we ask, we don't try to make it up.
mm.
We don't try to worry about what image is going to come. We just ask, heart, belly, could you show me an image that already knows these two things?
Mm, mm.
Discernment and listening with acceptance. And for lots of people, boop, an image comes right up. And I've never seen the same image twice.
Mm.
There are some common ones for sure. The water is pretty common, trees, nature scenes sometimes, but I've also seen like, oh, somebody had a black cat walking around an apple, a glass tortoise hanging on the edge of a milk glass, a piece of Tupperware. I know, but they mean something to you, to you. Oh, a lot of them evolve. Oh, at first I worked with somebody who had monster truck tires that then turned into a white picket fence like in a Connecticut house, but then turned into a black wrought iron fence, and then turned into a black wrought iron fence with a horse that runs both directions back and forth and can jump over the fence.
Mm.
A racehorse, a
And
stallion.
and what I hear you speaking to here is the absolute brilliant intelligence that is woven into us, that
Yes,
it's here to help us, right?
that's
Because no
right.
one, I mean, this is like the center of creativity, and I'm so moved by what you're saying because it's telling us that no matter how triggered we may feel,
Right.
how much we may be consumed with someone else's reality, and we have a hard
Mhm.
discernment, that
Totally.
when we build that internal resource and practice this skill,
Right.
turn of compassionately tending to the trigger that's arising,
Mhm.
and then move to a place of asking and listening, wisdom in the body,
Yeah.
not the thinking mind, wisdom in not the left hemisphere that wants to analyze,
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
Show me what inside of me knows, what discerns,
Already knows.
what already knows, and
Yeah. It's totally accessible. And so let's say we were working with this person and we had done this on the back end,
Mhm.
and she already had, for reasons we do not know, um, a, a kangaroo with a butterfly on its left ear. That's her image. And she's been practicing her image. She doesn't know why either, by the way, but she sees a kangaroo with a butterfly on its left ear, and she can like hold that image in between her and the world, almost like it was like on a transparency, those old transparencies they used to use in school. I'm aging myself here.
Yes, no, I remember the projectors that would
The
go.
projectors, and you have this like clear piece of plastic and you can draw on it and put it on imagine holding one of those up, but with a kangaroo and
Mm,
the butterfly on the left ear.
mm,
Great. She's got that. She's already figured that out. So what does she do in this moment?
mm,
She's going to put her kind, compassionate coarseness skills together with her psychological boundary skills. So the guy turns up and she goes, oops, I forgot my kangaroo, because she felt the in her body. She doesn't say, how dare you to him. She goes, oh, I forgot my kangaroo. And she puts it back up.
mm,
And her safety
mm,
comes up as we do that. And her brain naturally integrates, and her top brain is more online and able to hold her low brain. And in that moment, for just a second, she goes, of course you are guessing
mm,
that your voice doesn't matter,
mm,
because she already knows her history. And then she goes, let's check. And she turns to take in anyone else in the boardroom as well, to see if it's universal or just with that one dude. And she's got her kangaroo with the butterfly on the ear, and she's looking around, and who knows, maybe what she sees is somebody over there at the other end actually is cocking his head in an interested way. And she recognizes, oh, wait a second, he's interested. And then she recognizes, wait a second, I know this idea is good.
mm.
So no matter whatever happens, I matter to me. And all that happens in about 3 seconds, because we're talking about low brain skills.
Mhm.
And then
Yes,
she can take a breath and continue her talk.
all of that in 3 seconds when it becomes internalized. So
That's
here
right.
trigger emerges. She has this resource that she can turn towards for discernment. Is this me
Mm-hmm.
or is this him? Like, he gets to have the
Mm-hmm.
psychological boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, she calls up the image that her brain already provided that
Yeah.
communicates safety subjectively to her.
Mm-hmm.
Brings that up so her brain then knows to come online and bring safety in.
Mm-hmm.
She's able to have a moment where she can assess the room and actually see perhaps a smiling face or an interested face
Right.
in 3 seconds, and she's able to hold her own.
And
And
even if they weren't having interested faces, she can remember that she matters to her, because she's done that back end work too.
mm, mm,
Right?
extraordinary. And this is why, to me, we want to bring more and more of, the brilliance of your mind and what you've
Oh,
done in the fields of relational neuroscience and interpersonal neurobiology, more popularizing it, because we take some of these aspirational concepts that, emerged during the human potential movement, a lot
mm-hmm.
of the various, things that we see out there that are very aspirational. A lot of the things are neurobiologically inaccurate and in fact
Yeah.
confounding because it creates shame. And so what you're speaking to, and one of the many
Mm-hmm.
reasons I so admire and just appreciate you as a human, as a woman, is that you bring in a very fundamental way, a way to not only embody loving and respecting and taking care of ourselves and speaking up for ourselves, but also helping our body access what's already here to help
Yeah.
us come into a place of true power and true strength through an integrated resting place of calm and well-being from the
Yeah.
inside out.
That's right. Oh, I love that you're naming that, because there have been so many. Oh, old directives that actually taught us to work against our brain. And I'm just such a huge advocate of working with your brain. Your
Yes.
brain is already awesome. Don't worry.
Yes.
And skill, practice, state, trait is real. So skill is a brand new thing you learn. Practice, doing it, doing it, doing it. It becomes state. As you do it more, it melds in with all these other juicy goodness, that thing. And then over a 2 or 3 year period, if you regularly practice consciously, it becomes easier and easier and easier. And then it becomes total trait, habitual, and you've changed your brain forever.
Mm.
So when I wrote the book, I was just interested in like, what practices are actually going to help people work with their brain, not against their brain. And if they really commit to them and do them, you can transform your own brain. Go for it. I want to give these tools to as many people as I can. That's why I put it in book form. It was because when New Harbinger is my publisher, and when they asked me about maybe doing a book, I was pretty trepidatious. It felt vulnerable to put my voice out there in that way. And like, I don't know, it felt big, but it also felt hard because all this work I do is through conversation, and I'm co-creating spaces with people, and to put it in print form is like, well, wait a second, that's not a conversation anymore. And Jules does conversations. And what ended up tipping me over the edge was accessibility. I think I don't think this information is too hard for you to grasp. I think you can learn enough about how your brain works and how to support yourself with practices that are going to help you find your organic way to healing. And I just don't want that information to be hidden from people. So
Beautiful.
it's about putting that out there.
Yes. And I love that as we're going to be wrapping up here, I think you kind of spoke to my the a
Yeah.
final question that I wanted to ask you, and you sort of spoke to it because a lot of the times we those of us that are facilitators or we've been standing forward as, leaders or known people that are support players, it's easy for people to think things aren't hard for us too. And I speak very publicly and openly about where my ongoing growth edges are because there are many ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
And so because it's sort of like when we're able to peel back the curtains and see the shared humanity and how
Yeah.
relatable, like, yes, we can still be doing things, following the callings that we're called to do
Yeah.
that are hard and scary and overwhelming, and we're still doing them. And we're always learning and growing. We're always integrating. So I was going to ask you, and you sort of touched upon it. What do you feel in you right now is a piece that you're working with in terms of gathering together your capacity to really speak up, stand forward, and be the light that you are here to be?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question and a big one.
And it is a big,
In 1,000 ways. Like I could, how much time do we have? um, here's here's what I think. Here's my big growing edge, and I'm really like living into it as much as possible. Is I feel scared and internally rejecting of leadership often. I feel scared of leadership, and there's threads in me that really don't want the job. It's hard, and I only I'm a I feel worried if leadership isn't an act of service.
Mhm.
It worries me, and so I really want to. If I'm going to step into that, I never want to leave that way of thinking about it, and I get worried, like, oh, will I? Um, so there's a lot about it that makes me nervous. Some of it's the vulnerability, but also the will I do it well enough? What if I fail at it? What does that mean? Like, I don't want to harm people. Um, so I get scared often
Yeah.
around any leadership stuff. And recently I had some hard moments that ended up with this really deep awakening that me not greeting that internal rejection of leadership well was actually going to create harm.
Mm. Mm.
And so
Yeah.
I've been doing my own containing boundary work practice, which is full of loving kindness. I touch my heart. And I say my value words. So my personal value word is courage, and my interpersonal value word is kindness.
Mm.
And I've been like feeling that physical impulse to go, no, like turn away from it. And I've been working on greeting that and going, okay, Jules, courage, kindness. How do you greet this pushback really well just inside of you? And then, by the way, what did that just come up in response to? And can you do that again? Courage, kindness. I reset myself with my value system so that I can find, well, if I don't just live into that rejection of leadership, what am I gonna say yes to in this little moment of what's being asked of me with as much courage and kindness as I can?
Mm.
Does
Beautiful.
that answer?
I
Did I go off on a tangent?
no, we are here together, and I really hear it's, your version, like all of us, of
Mhm.
updating, some of the stored experience around what leadership means,
Mhm.
knowing, I mean, look, God, like leadership, the representations of leadership in this world today and what we're coming from, it's like, oh my God, I think that's why few women want to identify as leaders, because it's like, I
Mhm.
don't want to be that
Right.
hierarchical, bombastic, manipulative
Mhm.
representation.
Exactly.
So I'm making sense of, like, no
Mhm.
wonder about the rejection. And
Mhm.
and just I so appreciate you're making explicit your process of working with that, because that's an
Mhm.
invitation for all of us in each of our own ways to take the thing that is where we're being called to be more courageous or being called to step up and to work with the resistance and to bring it in with compassion and
Yeah.
curiosity, and to find our way to open to new possibilities within, not only in unlocking parts of our brain, but also
Mhm.
just in our full potentiality. So that was you. I'm going to give you an A plus plus, even though you're not getting anything. But no, that was
Yay. My overachiever parts though were like,
yeah,
yay, I
you did
did
good. I have
good.
notes too. So yeah. Truly, thank you. I really I have a I have a lot of deep caring in my heart and love for humanity, and how much we each have. I sort of think about, like, while we have so much going against us, we have
Mhm.
so much going for us. And so just
Mhm.
in the way that you are a beautiful, relatable, accessible human that's really doing good work in the world. And that is demonstrating through your beingness, but also through that your keen intellect and your ability to transmit and to share this information, to educate
Mhm.
people like me and many that really, really benefit from learning what you have learned. So thank you for your beautiful work in the world.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you so much for inviting me here and building what you've built and letting me share these ideas with your folks. Oh my gosh,
Yes,
it's
it's
so great.
and I'll put in the show notes, I'll put, how to access, how to contact you, and your book and all of that.
Yeah,
So with that, any closing thoughts before we sign off?
just go out there and love each other and yourselves as best you can, y'all.
Y'all got it?
I am a Texan.
Yeah, I was gonna say she just gave that was her tell. She's a Texan.
I am from Austin, Texas. Y'all have a good day now, you hear?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jules.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me.